son, Tim. He's going to talk to us tonight about if you have bad credit, how to make it good and how to keep good credit the way it is. And possibly a little bit on investments.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
So, treat him like you treat me, will you?
Oh, boy. We look the same. We're just stretched out a little bit. Hey, my name's Tim Powell. I'm son of Bill and Linda and Jenny's little brother. And tonight, Sabrina, my wife, came out. For any of you who don't know Sabrina, she's out here with us. And our two little girls, Lily and Adeline. Sabrina and I next week are going to hit 18 years of marriage. That's pretty exciting. Thank you. And praise the Lord. So it's very exciting. But Sabrina is, just real quick little intro about us. You know a little bit about us. Sabrina's a full-time mom, a full-time homeschool teacher, and she's also a full-time housekeeper at the house, and she's a full-time real estate investor and property manager. So she stays super busy. I work at Wally Armour. I'm the general sales manager there. I'm not going to try to sell you a car tonight, I promise. Kind of. And kind of how I got here is a number of years ago, about 13 years ago, I hooked up with the Wally Armour family, and I sold cars there for about 2.5 years. 2.5 years into it, I had an opportunity to become a manager. And then a short time later, I had an opportunity to become a general sales manager there. So over the last several years, that's been my role. And because of that, I've had the opportunity to work with lenders on a multitude of different levels. From good credit lenders, bad credit lenders, special finance, alternate financing, and also different lending institutions outside of conventional banks. We also do some of our own underwriting and some of our own lending there. And I've had an opportunity to have a big part of that. So through working with the Armour family, and really by the Lord's blessing, I've had a chance to have my hands in things that I never would have before. And it's really the Lord just having his hand on that. And it's really neat that he's given me an opportunity to do that. I'm very candid with you. I barely graduated high school. I didn't think very much of high school was very interesting. However, after high school, I found that reading books about investing and learning about how money moves and flows, I just thought that was just so fun, man. It's so neat. I could sit down and read a tax book. I thought that was just so cool. But I didn't enjoy high school at all because it just didn't click. I don't know, a lot of you guys probably think that same way. I know I have some very good friends that are kind of in the back row here that they just seem to love school and did fantastic and graduated as medical students that are killing it. So that was not me. That was not the case at all. So that's kind of how I got to the position where I am. But every Friday night we have Family Fridays at our house. And the idea with Family Fridays is everybody's welcome. It's just open doors. Sometimes we'll have pizza. Sometimes we'll cook hot dogs. Sometimes we'll just hang out. But everybody comes over and everybody just chills out. Both Sabrina's mom and dad, my mom and dad, Jen and George come, Michael Madison sometimes will come by, and it's just an open door thing. Well, about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, after we'd eaten, we were just kind of hanging out a little bit. My dad was telling me a couple of things that were going on here at the church. Sabrina and I both attend, with our family, we attend DFC in Damascus, Damascus First Friends Church. We're involved there. And we have a lot of fun with it, so it's often that we'll talk about what's going on in church. And my dad had mentioned what you guys were doing, and boy, it sounded pretty neat, and it just grabbed my attention right away. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. What exactly are you guys teaching? And he kind of told me an idea what you wanted to do, and some things that you were kind of not going to talk about, and some things that were really important, some things that weren't quite so important. And he said, hey, just to pick your brain a little bit, if you were going to talk about personal finances, what would you talk about? What are a couple of things you would hit? And I said right away, I said, boy, the first thing you got to talk about, the first thing you got to hit is you got to talk about credit. And the reason why credit's so important with personal finances is it very much affects the money you spend, very much so. So I dove into that, and I kind of was telling him how to read your credit report. Now keep in mind, this is something I think is very exciting. So I'm kind of passionate about it. Yeah, I'm a nerd. So I was kind of telling him about it and how neat it was and how to read it, and he was kind of drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit. And then I said the second thing you absolutely have to talk about is that you have to talk about investing. And the reason why is it's such a big deal, your personal finances, that you invest some of it so you have some of it later. I mean, it's amazing how it works, how investing works, how it grows. It's just the coolest thing, man. So I was telling him all about it and showing him some things of how they work. And he's kind of looking at me with one eye like, you're crazy, and the other eye like, well, it's kind of cool. And he says, hey, would you just come talk to us? I'm like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. So we set the date, and here we are. So those are the two things we're going to talk about. I do want to give you a little bit of a heads up of how it's going to go. I'm probably going to talk for about a half hour, 25, 30 minutes. I'm not going to go too long. And the things we're going to talk about credit, I'm not going to go super deep. So if you guys have some questions afterwards, it's fine. And then we'll probably take about a 10-minute break, let you stretch your legs a little bit, and then we're going to go into investing. And then investing might even be a hair shorter than that, and then we'll kind of call it a night. If anybody wants to bust out after that, I'm not offended, it's no big deal. If some people want to hang around and ask some more specific questions, then that's okay too. I'm not going to have you here all night, but hopefully I'll kind of keep you intrigued with something that typically may not be that exciting. But before we do that, I'd really like to go ahead and pray. Lord God, we just thank you so much for being the God of gods and Lord of lords, Jesus Christ. And we thank you so much for your grace, and we thank you for your mercy. We thank you that I could come here tonight and we could speak. Just have a good time hanging out with these folks, Lord God. And I pray that as I speak about some things that are sometimes sensitive, that they come across the right way, Lord God, and that you'd open up our minds and you would open up our hearts, that it would land the right way, Lord God. And you would help us see things in the right light, Lord God. And I just thank you so much again for your grace and your mercy, and for this chance to be here with everybody. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Credit. We're going to talk about what credit is, what a credit report is, and what a credit score is. One big thing I want to hit, and some of this stuff we're talking about is sensitive, because some people in this room, just based on the size of the room, some people probably have had some credit bumps and bruises. It happens. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you can't switch things around. There's probably some people in the room, just based on the size of the room, that don't have any credit. They've never had credit. And there's probably a majority of folks in this room that have excellent credit, and you really don't know why. But you pay your bills and you can buy what you want. Tonight you're going to learn why. And really that's kind of the gist of it. For us, being Christians, one thing that's very important about credit is your credit report is really just no different than you in your high school. You remember when you were in high school and you got a grade report? What was that thing called? Report card. Remember getting a report card? Did you? I did too. You used to be able to change the grade on them. They were in pen. Now they just email them your mom and dad. Thank God they didn't do that when we were kids. It's been a very different conversation. Right. So your credit report is no different than your report card on what you pay back of people that you have made promises to. So as Christians, really, ultimately we want to have good integrity. We want to fulfill all the promises that we make. Does that make sense? If we make a promise, we want to fulfill it. Just a general rule of thumb is that's what we want to do. So whether they're big or small. So how your credit report kind of breaks down. I'll give you a little bit of a short version here in regards to score. So there's your report. All these things go into report. The report takes this algorithm and shoots out a score. It's a 3-digit score. All these things go into a report. You can read your report. Your report shoots out a score. You say, Tim, how exactly are the different things weighted? I'll be very candid with you. We could dive into some of that stuff, but some of it's extremely long-winded, so we're not going to go into all of it. We're going to give you kind of the basics of it. But in regards to score goes, a great credit score is anything over 750. 750 to 850. Can you guys see this a little bit or not really? Kind of. Okay, 750 to 850 is really perfect or great. That's great credit. If you're a 750 or if you're an 850, you're the same score. I've had customers come in and purchase things or pull people's credit, and they say, I'd say, hey, congratulations, Mr. Customer. You have excellent credit. You have a 750 credit score. And those same people have looked at me and they said, well, how high does it go? And I was like, it goes to 850. And they'll be frustrated. Why am I not an 850? I've paid everything perfect. Well, I get it. Good job. Congratulations. But there's several things that go in there. But there is no difference between 750 and 850 when the bank looks at it. It's just once you're perfect, you're perfect. It's the difference of having a 4.0 or a 4.3. You've already got it. You're there. Does that make sense? It's kind of like pouring water into the ocean. It's got so much it doesn't really matter. For your ego, that's kind of nice. If you want to hit that 800 number, that's great. That's fantastic. It's all good. But the next level is still really good credit, and that's a 700 to a 749. That's your next level of credit, and that's really good credit. That's good. If you've got anything over 700 Bacon score, it's good. You're doing great. You know, don't beat yourself up. 650 to 699 is considered fair. And anything 550 to 650 start to kind of go in the poor. And anything less than that 550 is just really considered subprime or just bumped and bruised bad credit. Okay? So that's your breakdown. That's your breakdown of credit scores. So the next thing you're going to ask, or you might wonder, is why is the credit score so important? What's that matter? What's the big deal on the actual score? Does it really mean much? Now keep in mind, your credit is two different things. You have a credit bureau and a credit score. Your credit bureau tells a story. The story spits out a score. Make sense? You got your report card, and you got your ultimate GPA. Follow me? So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of analogy, or have a little story. I always like stories, especially when you're talking about something that can be really, really boring. So we're going to have two people. Now, if you guys know my dad, you know he's an awesome artist. Kirk's a great artist. Most musicians, for some reason, are. But I don't quite have that talent. My daughters don't even think I'm a good artist, and they're 5 and 7. So we got two people. There's my guy. There's our other guy. All right. Now we need two names. What do we want to call him?
Bud.
Bud. Jake. Bud. Jake. All right. Bud and Jake are 18 years old. When you're 18 years old, you don't have any credit. You just turned 18. There's nothing there, man. It's called a zero score. Some of you guys maybe at 18 had your credit pulled, maybe looked at your credit score, maybe looked on Credit Karma for people that are a little bit younger and realized, hey, this says zero. I don't know what this means. Or it might say insufficient credit. If you went somewhere to purchase something, if you went to a jewelry store, or if you went to buy a car, or if you went to look at a house, and you're in that age or have not established any credit yet, they're going to say you're a ghost. You're like, I'm not a ghost. You know, I'm right here. I'm here. I'm live. I'm real. But in regards to credit, there's nothing there. So there's no story. You follow me? It's a zero. So Jake and Bud are 18 years old and they've got no credit. So who do we want to make bad decisions and who do we want to make good decisions?
Bud is bad.
Bud is bad. Okay, Bud, that's good. We remember that. Bud, bad. That's just for me because I want to confuse them. And Jake is good. He's a good guy. Not one's a bad guy or a good guy, but we just know that that's for the future. All right, so they're both 18 years old. They graduated high school. Life's pretty good, and you got these young guys. Life's good. They've got good jobs. They both have good jobs. They're making good money, right? So if you've got an 18-year-old guy, he's making good money. Life's pretty good. What's the first thing he's thinking about doing? Moving out, getting his own place, right? So Jake and Bud decide they're going to get an apartment. And so they go and they apply for an apartment. And the apartment complex, they pull their credit, because that's what they do. They may not even tell you they're doing that, guys, just so you know. What they're going to do is they're going to say, hey, Bud, give me your name. What's your full name? What's your legal name? What's your social security number? What's your date of birth? Where you live? How long you been there? Where do you work at? You know what they're really doing? They're kind of pulling your credit, just so you know. More than likely. It may not be, but a lot of times they will be. So they realize he's got zero credit, and they do the same thing with Jake. They realize he's got zero credit. I'm going to fall off this. I'm going to have to edit that out, okay? I'm going to get excited and fall right off. It's going to happen. All right. Carry my own insurance, Kirk. Don't get nervous. Just joking. So the apartment complex realizes they don't really have anything. So if you're in an apartment complex, if you're the apartment manager and there's an 18-year-old kid that wants to rent from you, what's your first thoughts? Guys, what's your first thoughts? Can he pay? Sabrina's shaking her head because she does apartments. What do you think? Madison's shaking her head. Now why are they a little nervous? You got an 18-year-old boy, just turned 18, moving out for the first time. We don't really know if they could pay. So if this apartment complex decides they're going to lend one of these two people money, guess what they're probably going to want up front? Or lend them, let them live in their home. They're going to want some. They're going to want a deposit. They're going to want some cash. So, how much do we want this apartment to cost? $550. Let's make even numbers. Can we do that? I get, perfect. $500. Okay, so the apartment is $500. So how much should they put down as a deposit? $500. So they got a $500 deposit and a $500 a month. How long do you normally take an apartment out for? A year. So they've got a 1-year contract. If I take 500 times 12 months, how much are they going to owe over that 12-month period of time? $6,000. So when they sign for that contract, or they sign for that apartment, guess what they're signing? They're signing a contract. They're signing a legal document. They've made a promise that they're going to pay it. Follow me? Promise they're going to pay it. So they swore they're going to pay it. They swore to pay it by putting it down a deposit. That was their upfront money. And they signed these papers that says, yep, I'm good for it. I'm a good guy. Well, they get this apartment. This apartment has, let's say, 3 bedrooms, right? So if I'm Jake or if I'm Bud and I realize that I just took on a $500 a month rent payment and all of a sudden I realize I'm not at my mom and dad's house anymore, guess what happens to my car insurance? Goes up. You know, a few more bills come in. I get tired of eating on 1 spoon and 1 bowl and 1 towel. I did this. So I realized, man, I gotta wash this thing every day. So what these guys decide to do is what do you think they want to do to make the rent a little cheaper? They're going to get some buddies, right? Now let's use the same friends' names. That way we don't make this too confusing. So they go and get 2 friends. How about Bob and what else? Bill. Bob and Bill. Making this easy. Good job. All right, so they go and get Bob and Bill, and Bud has a Bob and a Bill. And really, I'll be very candid with you, these guys are thinking smart. They're being kind of responsible. They're saying, hey, I can split what I pay, and all I have to do is get some buddies. So they get some buddies, and Bud and Jake, they decide that, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to split everything even, right? Actually, let's change this to $600 a month. That way, we split even at $200 a piece, right? 200, 200, 200. That's what they owe. So everything's going good for the first couple months. They go to get cable. They decide that just hanging out with the 3 of them isn't as exciting as they thought it would be. It's almost football season. We're going to need some Sunday ticket. So they call the cable company, and the cable company realizes they have a zero credit score. The cable company says, yes, we'll give you a cable box that probably costs us $10. We're going to tell you it's worth $500. We're not going to charge you that. We'll give it to you for free. But we're going to charge you a rental of $100 a month for cable. So they say, yeah, no problem. We'll just split that up between the 3 of us, sign us up, but you do need a deposit because we don't trust you because you have a zero credit score. So they put their deposit and they get their cable, and they find that they have to do the same thing with the gas company and the electric company and so on and so forth. Now keep in mind, and we're going to come back to this later, none of these things that they're doing is going to build their credit, okay? I just want you to know that. They can all hurt their credit, but none of those things can build their credit, and I'll explain that shortly. So they're about 6 months into it. The rubber hits the road. Bob gets a girlfriend, gets engaged, gets married. Gone. Bill's made some poor decisions, lost his job, went in late too many times. So guess who's stuck paying the rent? Jake. Well, meanwhile, Jake went out and bought some really fancy stuff because he's got people helping pay the rent, you know, and his hours get cut back a little bit. And guess what he's thinking right now? I can't afford this. Oh my goodness gracious. Now my buddy stuck me. Whose fault is it? My buddy stuck me. And Bud's thinking the same thing. My buddy stuck me. It's not my fault. So Jake, here's where we're going to draw a line. Jake decides to call the apartment company and says, hey, I still owe you 6 months worth of rent. I know I'm under contract. I had 2 people living here with me. I can't afford it anymore. I totally understand I'm under contract. There's nothing I can do to get out of it. But if I find somebody else to lease this to, may I get out of my contract? Is there anything I can do? They find favor with him because he's still current on his rent. He's done everything good. He leaves the place in good shape. He finds someone else. The apartment company fills it. Do you think the apartment company's mad at this guy? No. Do they think he's still a pretty stand-up guy? Yeah. Now, the other thing that he does is he realizes that he would love to have Sunday ticket. But he realizes that his cable bills due, and he barely has enough to pay it, so he calls Time Warner Cable. Has anybody ever called and canceled cable? Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's like, good night, man. You guys have done a lot better than I have over the last 20 years. Anytime things get tight, it's like, Time Warner, I need to cancel. What do you got in the way as a deal? You know, they always come up with something. So he calls and says, hey, I need to cancel my Sunday ticket. I need to cancel my cable. I need to cut back on this. I just can't do it anymore. I'm moving out of our apartment. What does Time Warner tell you to do? What do they want you to do? They want you to bring something back. What do they want back? Your cable box. Okay? Now, how much do you think that cable box actually cost? $10, $20, $30, whatever. I mean, it's like 1986. What do you think that they say the value of that cable box is? Yes, you're right. Yes, they say that's $500. Now keep in mind, in your fine print, you sign a contract somewhere and they said, hey, it's worth $500, but we're going to give it to you for free. So you don't care what it's worth. I got it for free. Who cares? Nevertheless, he says, Time Warner says, you need to bring your cable box back. So he marches down to the Time Warner cable. He gives the cable box back, turns in all of his remotes, signed the paper. He did a good thing. It is what it is, moves on. Also does the same thing with his electric and gas. So keep in mind, he still has no credit, right? Follow me? Still has no credit. Now, Bud, on the other hand, he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder because it wasn't his fault his buddies couldn't make rent. It wasn't his fault. So he's got a little chip on his shoulder. He realizes cable was due yesterday, but he turns on his TV. He does not expect it to come on. Has anybody ever been late on a cable bill? I have. Have you ever noticed that it's still on? Of course it is. If you cancel it, it stays on for 3 months. I don't know why. I think it's free to them, so they just leave it on hoping you call them back. I really don't know why. But nevertheless, he realizes he still has a Sunday ticket. Not only that, he's still got all those other channels too. That's Bud, sorry. So Bud doesn't cancel. He just doesn't cancel, doesn't pay it. So he goes 3 months of still watching TV. Life's pretty good. Landlord calls, drives him nuts a little bit. He pushes him off. I get renty. It's not my fault. It's my buddy's fault. Same thing with the electric. It backs up a little bit in the gas. Now keep in mind, neither one of these guys have credit, right? Both 18-year-old kids. Landlord finally gets him out of here. Do you think the landlord's okay with Jake, right? Do you think that company likes this guy? No. They finally do get him out. They got 3 months of not paying. Then they got another 30 days trying to turn this apartment around. Now, if this guy's having that kind of attitude, do you think he left the apartment in a good place or bad place? Probably, so it costs another 2 months to get this thing ready and then rent it out. So the apartment complex is kind of frustrated with this guy. All right, so here's what happens. Neither one of these people are bad people, but one guy made a lot of bad decisions. So our buddy Jake still has a 0 credit score. They would tell him, well, he didn't get anywhere. You're right, he didn't. None of those things will build up your credit. But our buddy Bud, bad Bud, what it unfortunately looks on his credit bureau now is he will either have one of two things. He will either have a 0 score or he'll be somewhere in the 400s to low 500s, depending on how a few things report. However, what's going to show on here is Time Warner Cable. That's going to be the first thing it shows. Time Warner Cable will probably cost you about $100 a month, maybe if you get all your channels. He went 3 months without paying, that's $300. They're going to charge you $500 for the box. They're going to say he owes us $800 at one time. He still owes us $800 not paid. It's going to say collections. Gas is going to show on here $300. Owed $300, still owed $300. Electric, $150, still owes $150. This rental company, we're going to call it ABC, said $600 times 6, whatever they're going to round up for fees and penalties and you name it. He still owes us, $5,000. So now, he says one of two things, 0 score or 500, 400. Keep in mind, Jake still has 0 score. When this guy goes to get Time Warner Cable, what do you think they're going to do? You think they really want to lend him money? They're going to say, before you put down your deposit to even get that, we need you to pay your first $800. Next time this guy goes to get gas, before they even put down his deposit, guess what they're going to want? Same thing with electric, same thing with any apartment. When this guy goes to get his next apartment, what's the first thing these guys are going to think? Yeah, this is all bad, man. No way, man. This guy scares daylights out of me. So now Jake doesn't have any credit either. So we're still, keep in mind that stuff doesn't report good. It can only report bad. It doesn't mean it is bad. It means you want to be smart about it. So here we go. A little bit of time goes down the road. They both meet a very nice young lady. Life's going pretty good. Work's going pretty good. They decide to go buy a car. Now, when Jake goes and buys a car, both these guys save up a little bit of money. Jake goes to buy a car, bank pulls his credit, sees he's got a 0 score. They say, hey, we're going to need one of two things. We're going to need either a cosigner or a little bit of cash down. That little bit of cash down says you're going to be, that's kind of like you having skin in the game. Does that make sense? If you're going to borrow some money and you're not so, you don't have a whole lot here, they're going to want some skin in the game. However, that same bank looks at Bud, Do you think they want a little bit of skin in the game or a lot of skin in the game?
A lot more.
Yeah. Now, Bud certainly will go to his friends and his family and ask them to co-sign. I assure you, if they have excellent credit, they probably will not. Because they've seen a trend here that they'll probably end up making that car payment for Bud, and they may not want to. They think if they're making a car payment, they'd like to have the car. However, he might be able to talk somebody into it. They may or may not. So, nevertheless, this guy, they're both probably going to have a higher interest rate no matter what they borrow money on. Credit cards, cars, small interest loans, whatever it is, they're both going to have a higher interest rate. Do you know why they have a higher interest rate? Not because they're bad people. There's no credit. No credit means there's a higher risk for the bank. You follow me? Higher risk for the bank. The more risk the bank has, the more they want to get back for their return. It's no different than when we invest our own money. The higher risk we go, we want more money back, right? If somebody says something's super high risk and you can make up to 4%, you're going to say, no, thank you. I don't want to invest my money on that. It's really high risk and you can make up to 23 or 24%. Yeah, I'll roll the dice on this. I'll roll the dice on this investment. Bank thinks the same way. So nevertheless, both these guys find a way to get that loan. Okay, so now we're going to go into something that does report to the credit bureau. We're going to talk about this particular one. Both these guys got a car loan. There are several ways to build up credit. Car loans, credit cards, there's a lot of good ones. And we'll talk about what's good and what's bad here in a minute. There are a number of different speakers that talk about credit being bad, all bad, stay totally away from it. I'm very candid with you. I'm not a fan of staying totally away from credit. I think it costs too much money. That's just me, and we'll hit a little bit of that later. I'm a fan of don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but nevertheless, we want to take advantage of everything we can. We don't want to pay a high interest rate, so we want to get our credit good. So when Jake goes and gets his auto loan, it'll show on his credit bureau an auto loan. Let's say he only borrowed $8,000. So he went to the bank, whatever bank this is, and at this time I'm also showing you how something looks on actual credit bureau. He borrowed $8,000. It's a $300 payment for a very short term. He took out a 24-month loan. And we're going to see 0, 0, 0, and over here on the side, we're going to see a row of ones at the top that are 12 and a row of ones at the bottom. So we see 12 ones and 12 ones. Now when a bank looks at this, so let's say he's what, 22 now, roughly? Jake's now 22. Anybody that pulls Jake's credit, whether it's going to be for jewelry, a credit card, a car, a house, for an apartment, for electric, for cable, for anything, is able to see that at one time he didn't have any credit. But 22, that's okay, it's normal. But since then, he did get a car loan. Here's the bank he went with. Here's how much he borrowed. He carried a $300 payment. He had it for 24 months. 0, 0, 0 means he was never late 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. To a bank, that's gold. All these ones are how many times he's paid perfect within the last 12 months and 12 months before that. A credit bureau shows at this point in time it's going to go back 24 months. So, and then also at this point, this thing is totally paid off. Now I promise you, when a bank looks at this, whether he's going to go borrow money for a credit card or if he's going to get an apartment, if you guys were the landlord and you're looking at an application and you see this, would you lend this guy an apartment? If this guy wanted a $500 credit card, let's say he calls Capital One and he wants a credit card, would you give it to him? Yeah, makes sense, right? So let's say Jake does go get his credit card. I think credit cards are a great way to build credit. Auto loans are too. If you say, Tim, my car's paid off, I don't need an auto loan, I don't want an auto loan, that's okay, you don't have to go buy a car. I think another way to cheat, and I say cheat, not a bad cheat, but you know, a way to beat the system. This term I always use. A way to beat the system. Yeah, be careful with that. A way to beat that system is to even take a loan out on your own car. Now granted, it may cost you $1,000 in interest. But to me, is it worth paying $700 or $800 or $900 or $1,000 over a 2 or 3 year period of time to have an excellent credit score? I think it is, because it's going to save you more in the long run. But we can touch on that later when you guys, if you have any questions about it. How a credit card reports is it'll actually say a credit card. And credit cards report really a lot different than anything else because there's 3 lines with a credit card. Most of the time when we borrow money, it's going to say how much you first borrowed and how much you still owe. Credit cards, believe it or not, have 3 lines. So the middle line on a credit card is going to be how much they're going to let you have. So if Capital One, let's say this is Cap One, they like him, so they're going to roll the dice with this young man. They give him a $500 credit card limit. That middle line is going to say $500. The top line says what's the most you've ever had on that card at any given time. Whether it's been in the last 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, however long it's been, what's the highest you've ever had your limit? A way to beat the system and to inflate your credit score even more is to never go past half of what you're allowed. Make sense? Really, if you can keep it at a third, it's even best. But if you're the bank, think about this for a minute. If you're the bank and somebody wants to borrow money from you, and you see that he was allowed to have $500, but the most he ever borrowed was $200, do you think this guy's responsible? Start to make sense? You see he's got a minimum $20 payment, but he always keeps his credit card paid off. Do you think this guy's responsible? Meanwhile, he's paid for his car perfect, and let's say he's picked up another credit card in the last couple years. What most banks look for cars, houses, or any major purchase, what they're looking for is they do like 3 open lines of credit. If you've got 3 open lines of credit and you're paying well on those 3 open lines of credit, you've had them for a little bit of time, and I mean a little bit of time, it's 18 months, 24 months, you will have between a 700 and a 740 credit score. This guy just went to the promised land. Now when it does come time for this guy to buy a house loan, this guy gets married, meets a young lady, and he wants to buy a house. Do you think he's going to have a hard time buying a house? No, they're able to look at his credit score and really get a good idea if this guy's going to pay them back. Now, based on whether he didn't pay these items, like like Bud, they may lend him money, but they're going to lend him at a much, much higher interest rate. Now, another thing is when he walks in to talk to his banker and his banker pulls his credit, it's no longer Jake. Now he calls him Mr. Smith. You know, Mr. Smith, we'd love to lend you money. We'd love to earn your business. So keep in mind, just 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, he was saying, please lend me money. Please lend me money. Please lend me money. What do I have to do? I have to put money down. Well, now Jake walks into the bank, and it's Mr. Smith, what can we do to earn your business so you don't go somewhere else? Instead of that high interest rate, now he's going to have stupid low interest rates, 3.9, 4%. This guy's going to have very, very low interest rates because he now is not, there's not a whole lot of risk there. Does that make sense? They know they're getting the money back. It's chip shot. It's chip shot for the bank. So things that can hurt you, credit cards, things that can hurt but not help, cell phones, gas bills, electric, things like that. Make sense? Things that build up your credit typically come with borrowing money, credit cards, cars, homes, even jewelry credit cards, store credit cards, things like that. But be careful not to really go past 30%. If you go past 30%, try not to go past 50. At that point in time, the credit utilization, believe it or not, will kind of actually hurt your score a little bit because they're going to think you're maxed out. They're going to think, wow, this guy's really starting to spend some money. We need to scale him back a little bit. So what that'll do is it'll drop your score down a little bit. It's not going to kill you, but it will drop your score down a little bit. Another thing that people often ask is how long does something stay on your credit report? Delinquencies typically will stay on your credit report for quite some time, up to 7 years. Bankruptcies are typically 7 years to 11 years. It depends on what kind of bankruptcy it is. And credit increase, if someone checks on your credit to see if you can buy something, it will stay on your credit for 24 months. And you might say, hey, Tim, why does that matter? Why should that stay on there? Well, if you've been shopping like a champ, asking everybody to borrow money, the next guy that you're asking to borrow money, he's going to want to know about it. You're going to say, Jake, why are you asking all these people to borrow money? In the back of his mind, he's going to be thinking, why do those people tell you no? Maybe they're seeing something I'm not seeing, so that's going to make them a little bit nervous. So keep that in mind. If you do want to keep an eye on your credit, I very much encourage it. I think Credit Karma is a fantastic way to do it. I don't know if you guys, anybody ever heard of Credit Karma? Everybody's head seems to be shaking up and down. You can do it on your smartphone, you can do it on your laptop, you can do it on your desktop, you can do it on an iPad. And whenever Credit Karma watches your credit, it's considered a soft pull. So when you look at your credit there, it will not show in your credit report that you or anyone else is looking at it. When you go to buy a car, when you go to get a credit card, when you go to do anything else like that to purchase or borrow money, it will show as an inquiry. Credit Karma, keeping an eye on that doesn't hurt you at all, but it is good to keep a good eye on your credit. I very much suggest looking every 4 or 5, 6 months at your credit. just to make sure there's nothing funny or anything silly on there, anything that shouldn't be on there. Heaven forbid, if something does end up on there that's not yours, call right away. Call right away. If you call right away and get on it and dispute it, typically you can get a pretty good answer. But if you don't look at your credit ever and you realize there's something on there from 4 years ago, I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's going to be much more difficult to get that off. If you're on it and you're keeping a good tally of your credit, good track of your credit, it's going to be very easy to zip that off without any problem. Now, keep in mind, if you have excellent credit, and some of this is kind of new to you or it's not new to you, that's fantastic. I'm very, very excited for you. If you are fresh credit and you're just learning or just starting out, here's a great way to do it. But if you've had bumps and bruises in the past and you're just kind of getting rolling, that's okay too. It's better you know where you're at so you can fix it. Now, if by some chance we have made some bad decisions in the past, let's say Time Warner, let's say we do owe Time Warner $500, and we want to start chipping away on some of those things that we owe money to, I very much encourage that. That's a great way to kind of rebuild your credit back up again, is to pay off some of those debts we owe. Keep in mind, we want to fulfill our promises. But if it's been on there for a long time, a lot of those debtors will take less money than you may have initially owed them. For instance, if I owed Time Warner $500 and it's been 2 or 3 years, I want to be careful with the conversation. I don't want to call them and say, hey, you've got to take $100. But I may call them and say, hey, I have owed you guys $500 for the last 2 years. I made some poor decisions. Owe you $500. I didn't make my Time Warner payment. I apologize. Would you take $200 to take that off my credit? More than likely, they probably will. But for heaven's sakes, don't do it if you can't pay the $200. I've seen it happen. It's just going to frustrate that creditor. The next time you call, it won't be as pleasant of a phone call. They're not going to work with you as much. Does that make sense? So if you've got $200 saved, you can call and be honest with them. Hey, I owe you $500. I made some bad decisions. I didn't pay it. I apologize. Please forgive me. I've got $200. Would you take that to take off my credit report? They think they're getting nothing. More than likely, they'll take it and they'll take it off. And if you do start to chip away at some of those things a little bit at a time, that will help you get your credit bill back up. Taking care of those negative things are fantastic, but you also do want to do some positive things there too. Guys, that's kind of it for credit. Man, that's credit 101. It's not too deep. It's very, very basic. And we're going to take really about a 10, 15-minute break. Does anybody have any questions about credit? Yes, sir.
Hey, you mentioned you see on your credit something that shouldn't be there. Like, what would be on there that shouldn't be there?
Now, if I look at Credit Karma, and Credit Karma says that I owe Time Warner Cable $500, and I've never had Time Warner Cable. I'm going to call Time Warner Cable, and I'm going to give them my information and say, I've never had an account with you, but you say I owe you money. One thing I want to be careful about is I do want to be cautious of identity fraud. I do want to make sure that my friends and family and relatives haven't picked up any of my information and haven't bought anything with it. Or really, heaven forbid, somebody stole information from me. Yes, sir.
I was going to ask, so once you pay them off, they get pulled off your credit report?
No. Believe it or not, if a creditor says you owe them money and you're delinquent or you're late, it will show that at one time you owed $500. It's currently paid off. But typically over here it'll say one of two things. It'll say reported to collections and then paid off. That means you really didn't do it in the time allowed. So that's not great, but it does tell a story. The story is, hey, I owed this money, I got behind, I did the right thing. Now granted, it wasn't in the bank's time, it wasn't in that particular company's time, but I did the right thing over time. I did it, I paid it off. So it's not as good as paying it on time, but it certainly is better than not paying. Does that make sense? Now, if you do settle for less than you owed them, it'll typically say settled for less. But if you're looking at lending this guy money and you see that he did owe some people money, he got a little behind, granted they settled for less, but that means he took the initiative to pick up the phone and call him and say, hey man, I owe you money. I apologize. I'm sorry. I made some bad decisions. Will you take a little bit less if I pay you off? That looks better than just telling these guys to pound salt. Make sense? Yes, sir.
That your credit score affects your car insurance rate?
It can. Your credit score can affect quite a few things, in fact. And really, yeah, it very much can. It very much can. And what's kind of sad is we don't really teach this stuff in high schools. I think some may. We never learn it. I do think that's sad. I wish we did. I think there's a lot more avenues out there now to learn than there were when we were kids. But yeah, it can affect a lot of things that you may not think it would. And believe it or not, you may not even realize that they're pulling credit or checking some of these things when they do that. Yes, ma'am.
You 30%? Is that 30% of your income? Or?
30% of your credit utilization. If I get a credit card through Capital One and they tell me I'm allowed to have $1,000, they tell me I'm allowed to have $1,000. Now let's pretend like you're the bank, okay? You're the bank and I'm coming to you to ask you if I can borrow some money from you. And you see that I borrowed $1,000 from Capital One on a credit card. I'm allowed to have $1,000, and I went out and I spent $1,000 on that credit card, and I still owe $1,000 on that credit card. How inclined are you to lend me money? What are you thinking about me? I'm a cowboy. Like, I'm just spending like a champ. Does that make sense? So what that's going to do is it's actually going to lower my score. The closer I stay to 30% of this $1,000 on this credit card, now if you're the bank and you see I have a Capital One card, I've had it up to maybe $500, so I've had it up to half, but I currently owe them $300, and I ask you for another credit card. Do you have any reservations to give me another credit card? So really that 30% number is pretty good. If it goes to 50, it's okay. 30 or less is actually best, really on all your credit cards. Yes, sir?
What if you use a credit card? I have a credit card I use to get miles for flying.
Yes.
And so I buy a lot of stuff on it to pay it every month. And it may go over the 30%. Is that bad if you pay it every month?
Well, the balance you're carrying on it is going to be less than 30%, so that's okay. They're going to look at that current balance you have on it. And if you're paying it off every month, believe it or not, that still shows that open line of credit, and that's actually pretty attractive. So if I'm another lender or a bank looking to lend you money and I see this guy uses his credit card but he pays it off, I'm thinking, guy's going to pay me too. Now if I'm the credit card company, I really don't want you to pay me off every month.
Right.
I truly don't.
Right.
So I'm hoping you pay him off every month and you stretch me out a little bit. That makes sense? By stretching me out, I make some money. Yes, Jen?
So how does it look then? If you have $1,000 and you're spending 5 or 7 every month, but you're paying it off every month, how is that looking to, you know?
I'll be very candid with you. If I were doing that, probably what I would do is, again, I like to use this term cheat. I'm going to call that credit card company. Now, if I'm doing that, do you think the credit card company wants to keep lending me money? Yeah, of course they do. Now, are they hoping I don't pay it off? Sure. Of course they are.
Well, they usually raise it anyway, right?
So you want to call them and say, hey, I really don't want a $1,000 limit anymore. I want a $2,000 limit. Don't spend the extra money. Now what you've done is the whole world can see that you're now allowed to have $2,000, but the most you ever use is $700. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And they'll have no problem raising your limit. Trust me. They like you. Yes, sir.
Now, I was advised when I was getting a credit card to keep like 10 or 15 bucks on it and not pay that off because they like to see that, you know, they can make some money off of you. Now, is that not advised?
I'm okay not. I'm okay not. I'm okay paying that thing off. It still shows as revolving credit. It still shows you're using it. Use it, pay it off. I'm okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Personally, I pay mine off. I use a credit card. And then when I get that in the mail, I don't want to make my minimum payment. I just want to pay that thing off. Yes, sir.
I have never paid like interest on the credit card, and I've grown my credit. Now,
You're winning.
But I've done it. It may have been slower, but I still built the credit without having to go into debt.
A larger loan?
What's that?
You mean without going into debt on a larger loan, larger dollar figure?
Well, like paying, like, you know, you said, you know, having to pay some interest. Like we did have maybe one car loan, I think we had at one point. That's the only car loan we ever had. And so it still grew. And so you're saying that the rent and all that stuff didn't actually count towards good credit?
No, rent doesn't. My cell phone bill doesn't. My electric bill doesn't. My gas bill doesn't. All those things that I'm just expected to pay where I'm not actually borrowing money isn't going to show on my credit report unless I don't pay it. I've been with Verizon for about 20 years. You'll never see it on my credit report. But believe you me, if I go 3 months without paying that bill.
What about medical expenses?
They don't count unless you don't pay them. If you don't pay them, they won't show. If you don't pay them, they will show on here. Typically, you know, obviously those medical expenses, if you don't make your medical bills, it will affect your credit score. But it shows up as medical. Most lenders are going to look at that in a different light. I'm not going to say don't pay your medical bills, because that will affect your credit score, but it isn't going to carry as much weight as not making your car payment or your house payment. Ultimately, the order is going to be your home. If you're current on your home, that's going to be the most important thing on your credit report. The next thing is going to be your auto loan. And the reason why is because those are considered secured debt. If you don't make your house payment, guess what's going to happen? We're going to take your home. If you don't make your car payment, guess what's going to happen? Right. Now, if I go buy my wife some really nice rings on her credit card and I don't make my credit card payment, guess what's going to happen? They're just going to get mad at me. There's nothing to come take. They're not going to come repo my dinner I had last night on my credit card. They're welcome to, but they can't. You know, there's nothing of value. So because that secured debt does mean more, it builds up your credit more. Medical collections really aren't going to affect it as much. When I say your meat and potatoes, I use the term meat and potatoes a lot. Your meat and potatoes are kind of this. Your credit score still means a lot, but it's your meat and potatoes that really a bank's going to look at. And another thing is, guys, it really does depend on what's going on. It really does. Some banks look at things differently. Prior to 2008, all you had to do was have a good credit score and you could buy anything you wanted to. If you walked in and you said, hey, I have this credit score, a bank would give you anything you want, any house you want, any car you want without asking any questions. That got us in a little bit of trouble. 2009, 10, 11. Banks kind of went overboard on wanting too much stuff, so where hardly anybody could borrow money. That made a drastic impact on the market, a very negative impact on the market. So banks really started opening their doors back up again and be a little bit more lenient. So to answer that question of it'll always be this way or always be that way, it won't be. It moves and it flows.
What are student loans doing to credit?
Student loans show a little differently. It does show student loan, but when you're in school, you don't have to pay a student loan. And it'll show that it's deferred. Believe it or not, a deferred student loan will still help you build a credit score even though you're not making that payment. Does that make sense? It will not show late. So if you've been in college for 4 years, you're like, yeah, that's good. Good job, you're beating the system. Anything to beat the system, that's good. So if I take out a student loan, and let's say I borrow $100,000 in my student loans, I've had it for 4 years, I'll show that I've had 4 years worth of payments. It'll show my 000 for 48 months, but then on the side here it'll say deferred. What that means is I really haven't made the payments. I haven't been late, but I haven't made any payments either. Does that make sense? Now, one thing that's tricky, and this is just a side note about student loans. Has anybody ever tried to get student loans? How easy is it? It's not that tough. You follow me? Has anybody tried to get a hold of the student loan department after having a loan? How difficult is that? Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's so amazing. It blows my mind. It boggles my mind. So, believe it or not, 6 months after being out of college, somehow by you know, who knows, man, but whatever company or lending institution or bank or whoever lends you that money for student loans, I promise you, 6 months after you're out of college, they know it. They know it fast, man. So don't think you can go month 7 because you haven't got your bill by not making your student loan payment. Believe it or not, they don't do a good job telling you it's due. They really don't. You could be in college for 4 years, have $100,000 worth of student loan debt, have a 740 Beacon score, never made a payment in your life on anything ever, but it's showing that you've never been late on these. It says deferred. You've been out of school for 6 months. Now you've been out of school for 8 months. They will now say you're 2 months behind even though they haven't sent you a bill.
Oh, you're kidding.
Nope. It's happened before. You may have moved. You may have moved out from your apartment. You may have moved your mom. You may have gone out of that house. You need to contact your student loan department and say, hey, I'm now out of college. I'm going to have some money come due. I owe somebody. Who do I pay it to? That may sound like a pain. But when I laughed, when I said, hey, who's ever tried to get a hold of the student loan department after you've had a loan, everybody's laughing saying, oh yeah, it's amazing. Sometimes you have to jump through some hoops to people you owe money to, because I'll be very candid with you, I don't think they really care if they get the money back. It's all government. It's silly. I think that's nuts, but that's for a different topic, different conversation.